The flames may be out, but a firestorm of controversy rages on after the assault on the Branch Davidian compound. Officials are starting to look for answers after doomsday in Waco. This morning, investigators began sifting through the embers of the Waco compound, searching for the bodies of more than 80 cult members believed killed in the fire. In Washington, President Clinton says he gives his full support to the decisions made by the Attorney General and the FBI to end the siege. But the family members of those killed in Waco have bitter words for those they say must bear the responsibility for needless death. Under the blistering Texas sun, investigators comb the smoldering remains of the Branch Davidian compound. More than 80 people are believed to have died in yesterday's fiery conclusion to the 51-day siege, 24 of them children. Today, the FBI said it's not responsible for the deaths.
Those children are dead because David Koresh had them killed. There's no question about that. He had those fires started. He had 51 days to release those children. He chose those children to die. We didn't have anything to do with their deaths.
The FBI said cult members didn't panic as tanks began to ram the compound, yet calmly, apparently under orders from Koresh, began to gather in an underground bunker and donned gas masks. Federal agents tried to help the few people they could see, including a man clinging to the roof.
And he finally fell off the roof. In exposing himself to danger, the HRT people gave out and put him out. He was on fire and saved him. Another woman came out who appeared to be disoriented. She went back into the compound. They got out and went to get her. So there was constant communication with everybody to try to get them to come out.
Only 9 people were rescued from the flames. As to why the FBI lost its patience after weeks of waiting, law enforcement officials revealed today that they had electronic listening devices inside the compound. Their eavesdropping led them to believe Koresh was becoming more violent and that intervention was necessary. This afternoon, 5 of the survivors were arraigned in court on charges stemming from the siege. Investigators hope they'll be able to provide some clues about life and death inside David Koresh's compound.
It's my impression that, from what I understand, that it was to the government's advantage that the compound either be demolished or destroyed or burned, because the physical evidence that might have some opportunity of disputing their contentions is now destroyed.
And tonight, the FBI cannot confirm reports that the children in the compound were poisoned before the fires began in an effort to ease their suffering.
Who has the ultimate responsibility for the plan that went tragically wrong? President Clinton says he does, and he is offering a strong defense of his decision of Attorney General Janet Reno and the FBI. Andy Field is live in Washington with a report. Andy.
Roz, the buck really does stop here at the White House. President Clinton finally took full responsibility for the FBI raid in Waco today in a news conference earlier this afternoon. He also says it's absurd to ask Attorney General Janet Reno to resign because they committed a mass suicide in the wake of that raid in Waco. And he says he welcomes an investigation into what went wrong.
I have a statement I would like to read.
Until today's announcement, President Clinton's Attorney General absorbed most of the blame for what happened in Waco. Today, the president said no. He gave the okay for the FBI to move in to help save the children in the cult compound.
And I take full responsibility for the implementation of the decision. Yesterday's action ended in a horrible human tragedy.
Well, the president's statement doesn't close the case. Mr. Clinton is now calling for a federal investigation into what federal police did right and wrong.
If any congressional committees want to look into that, we will fully cooperate. There's nothing to hide here. This was probably the most well-covered operation of its kind in the history of the country.
This is a very sad time in light of this terrible tragedy.
Attorney General Janet Reno told the president she wanted to tear gas the building in order to save children she thought were being abused and molested. She said experts there thought there was a possibility of mass suicide regardless of whether they moved in. But now the government will question if they could have waited longer.
I'm concerned about the hostage rescue team. I'm told they were fatigued. That opens up a lot of questions as to why replacements weren't available.
And the president warned Congress not to bash the FBI. He said the nation should put the Waco tragedy into perspective.
The FBI has done a lot of things right for this country over a long period of time. You know, this is the same FBI that found the people that bombed the World Trade Center in lickety-split record time.
The questions may continue for months. The official investigation starts on Capitol Hill this Friday. We are live at the White House. I'm Andy Field, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
It's easy to understand that Waco is a town in shock. Like all of us, the people there watched in horror as the tragic events at the Branch Davidian compound unfolded. But unlike any of us, these scars have been left on their town. JD Dapper is live in Waco, where people are trying to recover. JD?
Well, that's right, Greg. For 52 days now, the city of Waco has been inextricably linked with the standoff here, even though it is 10 miles outside of town. Now, despite this tragic conclusion, there is a sense of relief in the city that things might start getting back to normal. For this city of 100,000, life goes on, even in the shadow of the tragedy that has put this Central Texas community on the national map. Yesterday, as the 51-day siege at the Branch Davidian compound came to its infernal conclusion, the city stopped and watched and was silent. Today, Waco is talking.
Well, it's a tragic thing. It's a tragic thing, but I think our city, can come together, and I think we'll get over this.
Well, there are differences of opinion over how things were handled. People here are basically happy that it's finally over.
Everybody's yelling at this person and that person. It was this person's fault. What could they have done differently? David Koresh had it in his mind that it was going to be dead or something else. He made the decision. There's nothing we could do about it.
They stayed to themselves, and they didn't give anybody in trouble knowingly, as far as I'm concerned, because I didn't know anything about it. I don't know. That's just a tragic thing to happen. I mean...
Yeah, what can you say?
That's right, what can you say?
And at a healing service at the First Presbyterian Church of Waco, Texas Governor Ann Richards spoke about the events of yesterday.
I think it's a time for us to begin to try to heal. And in that healing, to try to remember that we must love one another. We must care for each other's feelings.
As one man said, getting back to normal means getting back to being boring. And that's one thing the people of Waco are looking forward to tonight. We're live outside of Waco. JD Dapper, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
The agony over the Waco tragedy is being felt in Koresh's family and the pain of his grandmother. Fighting back tears during an appearance on Good Morning America, Jean Holub said she hoped to save Koresh's children from certain death at the compound. Here's what she had to say.
I was planning on telling him, let me bring his children out, I could take care of a bunch of them. But I didn't get that chance, and now I'm wondering why. It's very hurtful.
Holub said communications with Koresh were cut off recently, and the FBI refused to send tapes she had made into the compound. While investigators look for clues in the charred remains of yesterday's inferno, David Koresh's lawyer is blaming the government. He claims the battering rams that punched holes through compound walls were part of a pattern that led to the compound's fiery end.
I think you have to look at how this whole thing got started and look back to February the 28th. That's a very important part of this entire tragedy. This is not a case of child abuse, as Janet Reno seems to now, after the fact, say. This is a case of abuse of authority.
The FBI says some cult followers may have shot fellow members when they tried to escape the compound yesterday.
Many families of the Branch Davidian cult members watched in horror as the compound was leveled by fire. For the mother of one survivor, the scene was inevitable. After the fire, Belinda Ganem recalled her efforts to convince the government to allow families to intervene, but she believes agents had their minds made up.
They knew that they were going to do this. They've predicted all along, which is why we wanted family vocal voice and cult awareness intervention on a more powerful, more impacting basis.
Ganem is the mother of 24-year-old David Thibodeau, who escaped from the compound and is now being held in a Texas jail.
Douglas Wayne Martin, a lawyer from Queens, and 3 of his children are believed to have died yesterday in the compound. They are only part of the New York connection to dangerous cults. David Navarro looks at the increasing numbers of cults and their brainwashing techniques.
The apocalyptic ending at the Branch Davidian compound near Waco, Texas, has focused attention now more than ever on what some people say is an increasing number of dangerous cults in America. Not since Jonestown, where almost 1,000 followers died in a suicidal and murderous frenzy, have so many been sacrificed in the name of a charismatic cult leader.
Clearly, we've seen an increase in what we call cultic activity, along with an increase in generally speaking, sort of religious activity.
Some experts estimate there are about 30,000 followers of bona fide large cults in the United States and Canada. In fact, one of those feared to have been killed in the fire in Waco, Texas, was a Harvard-trained lawyer from St. Albans, Queens. His father is still an elder at the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Laurelton, but reportedly disapproved of his son following David Koresh. Today, the family was not available for comment. However, this woman will talk. She says she is a former member of what some call the biggest cult in America, Scientology.
What you're seeing here in Waco is the very end of the story. The beginning, they come off as very benevolent, having very benevolent world goals. They're not all religious in nature.
Cults brainwash their followers through these techniques: intense indoctrination, control of all information, destroy doubts before they can grow, reinforce fears such as God will punish you if you stray, and through public confessions where peer pressure and guilt leads to conformity. But is that enough for a mother to sacrifice her own child? It is believed about 17 children were lost in the fire near Waco.
They believe that to sacrifice their lives and their life of their children is what's important to serve God.
The director of the cult hotline believes the fact the Branch Davidians would commit suicide comes as no surprise. After all, if they believed Koresh was the Messiah, then what was there to fear? David Navarro, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Experts say the number of cults in this country is expected to rise as we get closer to the turn of the century, and charismatic types use the end of the millennium to make doomsday prophecies.
All right, recapping the aftermath of the Waco tragedy, government agents are now looking for answers in the rubble of the compound, saying some cult members may have been killed before the fire started. An intensive search is now underway for more than 80 bodies. It was also a day in court for one survivor who claims authorities started the fire, and President Clinton blames Koresh for killing those he controlled.